Welcome. Welcome to the Wayland Library and welcome on behalf of the library and the Wayland Historical Commission. I will be brief. I also want to welcome folks from other libraries around the state who are joining us on Zoom. Just housekeeping, we are recording this, so we'll be able to share a link and you'll be able to share with your friends. She's saying move over to get in the camera. That way. It doesn't matter. They just need to hear me. Our speaker will speak for about 60 minutes. And then we'll have questions. So if you're on Zoom, put your questions in the chat and I will raise my hand and read them aloud at the end. And now I'll hand it over to Kay from the Historical Commission.
Well, the Wayland Historical Commission and the Wayland Public Library want to welcome everyone. And we're so pleased that the family can be with us today of the house that we're going to be talking about. We have many people in library land, as well as other historical societies and historical commissions, and I'm sure you will enjoy tonight. Wayland is unique, but having so many, Wayland is not unique in having so many old houses. No matter what county or town you're in, you will learn valuable lessons today about researching your house, your neighborhood, or a potential new house. Houses have many stories, even if they only have one floor. For those who are in-house, I would like you to be sure that you turn off or mute your phone. And just remember, when you turn your phone on, there's a bright light on you and the others around you, which may disturb you. So please don't look at your phone while Marian is talking. As Courtney has said, please hold all your questions till the end of the lecture, because that's when she'll have time to talk about it and consider your questions. Now, Marian Pierre-Louis, is that correct? Specializes in house histories, genealogy, which is family research, and cemeteries research. Just from that, I'm very impressed, but I can tell you right now, I bet she falls down rabbit holes a lot. So she's published over 500 articles online sharing what she has learned during these researches. For continued helpful hints for you, in case you can't write it all down fast enough, you want to go and do your own historical rabbit hole about your house. Be sure that you look at the Northeast House Historian.com, and she has already put things up there about Wayland. Marian says she's been researching for about 25 years, and I think that's about as long as I've been paying attention to her. And the stories that she has to tell, the secret stories that the houses have held for so long, is she's willing to share. And I've listened to other expertise speeches that she's made on genealogy and cemeteries. Actually, I hired Marian in the town that I worked in. And so now I'm so pleased that she's in Wayland doing one of the Wayland houses. Marian?
I'm gonna, can you hear me okay? All right, so this is called 10 Steps to Researching the History of Your House in Wayland, Mass. Before I start, I have to acknowledge the Wayland Historical Commission, the Wayland Library, and the Town Hall, the Assessor's Office. And they have done an amazing, fabulous job with preservation. They are really a role model in the state of Massachusetts when it comes to preservation. They made my job easier doing the research. I went a little overboard during the research because they made it so easy for me. But really, for anyone who's listening online, if you are from another town, they are a role model. Go online, see what they have done. They have digitized and they have put online so many important documents that make it accessible and easy. So what I'm teaching you tonight, you're going to be able to go home and just do from your computer because of these folks. So I just really want to acknowledge that that is not the norm. I'm not just saying that because I'm here. You have a really special situation here in Wayland. So thank you, Kay, for all that effort. This talk is intended, and the goal is so that you will research the history of your own house. That is my single minded goal for you tonight. I want to enable you to feel confident that you can become the expert of your own house. And I'm going to use this house here in Wayland as our example to walk us through that. But really, it's about you. And I want you to feel comfortable when you leave, knowing that you can start this history research. Just a couple points before we dive in. Obviously, those of you who are here are interested in learning about the history of your house, and that is great. If you like mysteries, if you like puzzles, anything like that, then you will love house history research. Kay mentioned rabbit holes. There's a lot of rabbit holes in house history research. You get started and then you get attached to the people that you're researching and you just keep going. But in addition to that, you're also preserving local history. So it's more than just researching your own house. You're actually preserving part of Wayland, part of the history here that people might not know about because they haven't done that deep dive. So you're doing something special whenever you research your own house. So consider sharing that with the local historical society or the local historical commission, because it will be important in their fight to preserve your house in the future. So share the information you find. It also increases the value and the uniqueness of your homes. If you're selling your home or something like that, having a house history is a good thing to have around. Another thing I want to dispel is that your house does not have to be 200 or 300 years old to make a good house history. Every house can have a good house history. House histories can be done on houses of all ages. If you're building a house, that's the perfect time to gather the blueprints and all the materials that you would otherwise probably throw out because you want to move your couches and stuff in. You don't really want to keep all that paperwork, but you should, because that's when your house history starts. Oh, I should have changed that. Number 2 there, the most in-depth house histories are actually now 1950 or earlier. That one got by me. And that's because the censuses are available from 1950 and earlier. You can research houses that are built later than 1950, but really you're going to have more documents to work with 1950 and earlier. And then the other thing, the point I want to make is multifamilies make really great house histories. 2 families, 3 families. Multifamily houses really parallel the history of America as immigrant groups are coming through. And you see that shift happen in those multifamily houses. Or if you have somebody who lives in a condo in on one of the old mills or warehouses that got converted, those are great house history topics too. And you would approach it the same way as we're going to approach it tonight, except first you're going to be dealing with companies, you know, and then you'll look into the people who worked or own those companies. So lots of great potential for house history research. Everything I will be talking about tonight has a center focus on the Wayland Library. This is MJ. She approved this photo. She, remember her face, she can help you. So you can make use of the books and materials here in this local history section that you see right there. Some of the stuff is locked and some of the stuff is open, but it's there for you to use. There are computers in this library so that you can access ancestry.com. You don't need to get an expensive subscription to Ancestry. If you want to, go ahead, but if you're not sure, if you're into house history research, just come to the library and check it out here and use their computers. And then there are also the online resources that you can use from home. Those have been made available to you from the library, and the Historical Commission and the town. And they've put it up on Internet Archive, but you can come to the library website to find all the links for that. So I'm not going to tell you every 2 minutes where you can find all these things, because basically you just need to go to the library or either in person or from your computer at home. Or go see MJ. All right. The way I like to teach house history research is using a house as an example. So tonight's house is a 396 Old Connecticut path here in Wayland. And so we're going to do a deep dive. I'm going to take you through the exact process that I went through to research this house. That's what we're doing tonight. So That's why it's a 10-step process. So step one is town hall. So in genealogy, we have a saying, you start with the present, you prove each generation backwards. If you don't do that, later you may have to chop off some of your family tree because you may research people who are not your family. It is exactly the same thing with houses. Sometimes town halls have maps, like 1860 or 1880 maps on their walls, and you can actually see your house in some of these maps. And there's a name there, the person who lived there, and you're like, oh, look, that's so cool. Look at that person in my house. And then you say, I'm just gonna go research that person. Well, keep in mind that your house back then might have been 10 acres and your house now might be an acre. And literally, if you start from that person, you could be researching your neighbor's property by the time you get to the present. So start with yourself as the owner now and prove each owner backwards. It's critical if you want to do it right. So the first step in house history research is you need that book and page. It just so happens the town hall is really convenient for getting that information. The field cards, as they call them, the information about your house, has a book and page for your current deed. And it also has current and previous owners. It has the year your house was built. Sometimes it has permits that are pulled for work, things like that. If you go poking around town hall website, you find all sorts of information. So this, I don't think you can see that all that well. No, you can't, but that's all right. So this is a field card, and really all you need to do is keep a look at the red boxes. Now, every town in Massachusetts has these field cards, but they look different. So if you're in another town online, don't expect it to look like this. The box at the top, that is the map ID number. And so that one says 42D/16. If you make note of that number, it makes it really easy to find a map that has your house on it. And I'm going to show you that. This other box, and you'll want to make note of where that is. It says record of ownership. And that has the current owner. And it also has the book and page number of your deed. And that's where you want to start. So these are the owners here. This right here, book page. That's what you need, is that book and page number. That's how you're going to get started in the deed research. This is the second page. It's a 2-page field card. This box has information about when the house was built. And this one has 2 years. It says year built 1878, effective year built 1983. So let's start with effective year built. So as far as the town is concerned, that's the age of the house from a structural point of view because it's been renovated. The year built, I want you to treat that suspectly across the board in every town in Massachusetts. Maybe it's accurate, maybe it's not. I've seen them as far as 100 years off. The reason is the tax man did not create this field card so that you could research your house. He created this so he could tax you. And it gets to a certain point where 1878, 1882 doesn't really matter in terms of what you're going to be taxed. So they try to be as accurate as possible, but remember, you're going to be the expert on your house, not the town. And ultimately, even if you find out exactly when the house was built, like we will today, you don't even need to bother to tell the town. It doesn't really matter. Tell that historical or the historical society. They need to know. Okay, so there's another page on the town website. It's on your handout. All the URLs are on your handout. So you need to go to this page first, and you need to see where in Wayland that you live. So it just so happens that this house is down in box 42, and you'll notice box 42 is divided again into A, B, C, D. And so this house is actually 42D. So you need to take that information. That's how you're going to find your map. And here you go. Here's a 42D. And we see 42D here. And that little map that you just saw, if you click it, it links to this. And over there in red, that is the property in question. I really like maps. I like current maps and I like older maps because it really grounds me to make sure I'm researching the right property. And I can see how the property has changed over time by gathering as many maps as I can. So I always start with the GIS map at Town Hall. I also grab a map from Google. You don't really think of it, Google, as an archival document, but it is. Those aerial views, I grab those every couple of years because they change. So anyways, here's your assessor's map that you can grab from Town Hall. And before we get too deep, a couple things to keep in mind about Wayland. Wayland is in Middlesex County, and Middlesex County was formed in 1643. Because it was formed in 1643, you don't really need to even bother worrying about that, except that you need to know that you need to go to Middlesex County to find the deeds. Other counties, say Norfolk County, that was formed in 1793 from Suffolk County. So if you live in Norfolk County and your house was built in 1730, you need to know that before 1793, you need to start looking in the Suffolk Registry of Deeds for your deeds. But luckily here in Middlesex, you don't have that problem. You're sticking to Middlesex all the way back. Now we also have a couple divisions, shall we say. So Wayland was originally established in 1639 as Sudbury. There was a division right after the Revolutionary War in 1780. And west of the river became Sudbury and east of the river became East Sudbury. And then in 1835, East Sudbury was renamed in Wayland. So that does impact you if you have an older house, if you have a house from 1750, because in that time period, it's going to be referred to as East Sudbury. Wayland isn't in the documents yet, okay? So this is across the board the way it is in Massachusetts. The way the state grew and then the towns were big and they divided and it just kept happening continuously. So whatever town you're in, you need to kind of be aware of the growth and division of that town in order to find the documents. All right. Step one with Town Hall, literally that'll take you 5 minutes. Step two is finding the deeds. This is going to take longer, but this is so important. And I used to say that this is the boring part of the research, but I don't know, after this house, I'm going to say this was pretty phenomenal. This was fun. So I would encourage you to read the deeds closely because they might have hidden information. And if you just gloss over them, and I'm going to show you why I say that, if you gloss over them, you'll miss all this great stuff. A little bit of vocabulary that's really important to know. And really, these are the only 2 words you need to know. Grantor, the person selling the property. Grantee, the person buying the property. If you own a house right now, you are all grantees. If it's your first house, you've never become a grantor yet, but when you sell it, you will become the grantor. Notice that this is property and not house. Land, deeds transact property, not buildings. And the further back you go in time, the more important that concept is. You may think there's a house on a property, there may or may not be. But just keep in mind that it's selling property. Deeds contain the parties involved in the transaction, so that's the grantor or the grantee. They contain a description of the property, a reference to the previous deed, meaning the book and the page number, dates of the transaction, and the signatures of the grantors. I want to make a special note about the description of the property. One thing you should note carefully when you're doing deed research is the size of the property, the acreage. And so when you start that first deed, say it's 2 acres, okay? And then you go back, it's 2 acres, 2 acres, 2 acres. And at some point you'll hit it might say 10 acres. So when you see that change in the size of the property, that's when I want you to slow down and then reread the description to see what has changed. So what we're gonna do with deeds is, it's a process called chaining a deed. And what you're doing is you're looking at yourself first as a grantee, because you're the current owner. You're figuring out who sold you the house. And then you're gonna look for that grantor, the person who sold your house, you're gonna look for them as the grantee and find out who sold them the house. And so it's this back and forth process. Now, if you're lucky, every deed that you find will have a book and page number. And you won't need to do this looking up of the names, but you need to know how to use the indexes to search for the names alphabetically. And if you don't have a book and a page number. Okay, so this is how you get started. You need to create a deed chart because you need to be able to keep track of the information you find. This is really important. So the information you're going to keep track of, I have 2 columns there for the dates. You don't need that. So there's the transfer date or the recorded date. They're not always the same. That's why I keep them separate. But you have a column for the grantor, a column for the grantee, the book and page number. I like to take notes. Usually that's where I'm putting acreage, things like that. And then there's a column for the price if it's listed. So I just made, it's a simple little chart made from Word. You can grab copies on my website if you like, so you don't have to make it yourself. There's a editable Word version and a PDF version for printing. But you really need to write this information down with each deed you find and as you go back. So now we're gonna start to look at some of these deeds. So this is the first deed, the most recent deed, because we're starting with the present and moving backwards. And this is the grantor's Betty Place. And she is selling the property to Spencer and I believe it's Laura, right? Yeah. And so usually I don't even really look at the first deed. I just blow by it because it doesn't really have anything to tell me. All I want to know is the book and page number, which is down here, right here. But I just go and I grab that and away I go. I'm on to the next deed. Who cares about what this deed said? No, but this stopped me in my tracks. Look at this. It says Betty L. Place hereby reserves a life estate in this property. And I don't mean to point this out in terms of the family, but that phrase is usually something I'll find in an 1800 deed, not a 2022 deed. So I said, wow, this is going to be a little different. So what that means, does anybody know what that means? Anybody want to tell me?
She gets to live there or use it.
That's right, she gets to live there for the remainder of her life. You just don't see that too often. Okay, all right. So that really set the tone for me when I started researching this house. Here we go, back to 1982. This is a deed from Alice Richardson. Now, I want you to keep in mind, at this point, I have no idea who these people are. Nothing. These are just names on a piece of paper to me. I don't know who they are. I don't know how they're related, nothing. So deed number 2, Alice Richardson is a grantor. She's a widow, it says at the top there. And she is selling this property to Herbert Place and Betty Place. And down in this red box down here, let me read this to you. The grantor herein, Alice Richardson, hereby accepts from this deed and reserves to herself a life estate in the granted premises for and during her natural life. Wow. Once is amazing, twice. It's like lightning striking twice. But luckily, all I really care about is that book and page number. But I'm thinking to myself, what's going on with this house? Now, there's something very important I want to tell you about this book and page number. The book number is 8212. Now, the number doesn't matter. It's 4 digits. I could not pull it up online when you're doing your deed research. So I'm I'm getting frustrated because I can't get this next deed. So in the end, ultimately I said, I added a 0 in front of the 8 to make it 5 digits, and the deed came up. So if you get stuck with an older deed, put zeros in front to make it 5 digits. That will help you. Okay, so now we're going back to 1954. Rosanna Fisher Richardson. And she is granting to George Prentice Richardson and his wife Alice Richardson this property. And in this case, this is one of those moments that I would make note of, because this is not just one property, there's actually 2 properties. So this is a 3-page deed. However, here we are on page 3. Let me just read you what this says. And that the grantees continue to support myself, the grantor, and my husband, George Richardson, I love this, in a comfortable manner during our joint and separate lives. I love that they put that there, because they're not off the hook if one of them dies. They're not off the hook till both of them die. I love that. Joint and separate lives. This deed is to become absolute upon the death of myself and my husband, and should they fail to perform all and singular the foregoing conditions, this deed is to be void. I love it. I think deeds today should have these clauses. So can anybody tell me, this is the 3rd deed now we've had. Can anybody tell me what is happening? Why is this happening? Anybody take a stab at it?
They're probably
Keeping-
related in family.
Yeah, keeping the property in the family.
Mother, you're gonna take care of the parents until they die, but now you own the property.
Yeah, so the nice lady here in the audience is suggesting that this is family. And that would be the first thing that would come to my mind. If you see something like this, even though the last names are changing, this is family. And I just love that they're doing this. Not only is this family, this is a tradition in this family. So this is, so Prentice, as he went by, and Alice actually split up the property. And if you look at a map of Wayland today, so this big section here is the property, and then they divided off those 3. So you can find plans online. So in the deeds, there will be references to plans. You can take that information and pull these up as well. And I think it's extremely helpful for understanding the land and how it has changed from when it was originally bought. Okay, so now we're going back to 1892. And it's a really short deed. And so this is from Henry B. Fisher of Wayland, so another last name. And it's the valuable consideration is from paid by George Richardson of Wayland. However, the house is being bought by Rosanna Fisher Richardson in her own right. And it says, and upon the following conditions, Richardson to maintain myself and wife comfortably in our several lives and carry on said farm in a skillful manner and pay the taxes. This deed to become absolute at the death of myself and my wife, but fail to perform this and it becomes void. So this is where it started with Henry B. Fisher in 1892. And for, I think it was 4 subsequent deed transfers after, all maintained that clause. So it clearly became a tradition in the family that's how they would transfer property amongst themselves. And I just thought that was so cool to find. When we looked at the field card at the beginning, remember it said the house was built in 1878. So here we are in 1866. And this property is being sold by Samuel Ward to Henry Fisher. And it says a certain farm with the buildings they're on. Situated partly in Wayland and partly in Framingham. Deeds don't always indicate that there are buildings on them. Sometimes they do. When they do, that's great, because then you know, well, there's a house on that lot. So the assessor says the house was built in 1878, but here we have Samuel Ward selling Henry Fisher a property with houses on it in 1866. Well, so what's coming to my mind is we'll probably have a couple houses on this property. Or else somebody got it wrong completely.
Well, one of them burned down.
Yeah. I'm gonna get to that. All right, if you get stuck with your deed research online, try different little things, like I said, about adding the zero, try different ways to search. But if you really get stuck, you might need to go to the registry building. I really hope that doesn't happen. It's in Cambridge, at Leechmere, near Leechmere Station. I haven't been there in a long time. The deed books are in the basement. The last time I was there, they were an absolute mess. Hopefully it's better now. But if you really get stuck, you can go. I would bring like a teenager with you. Because the books are really, really heavy and really dirty. No, I'm keeping it real here. But there should be no need for you to go to the registry. Because the registry of deeds online will cover back to 1900. 1900 and before, you can go to a site called familysearch.org and look at the deeds there. They have all the older deeds. And not only that, they have better imaging, so they're easier to read. So when you get to 1900, you'd want to go to their site and so you can read the deeds. But if you ever want an adventure and you really get stuck, you can go to the registry building. Just bring your phone so you can take pictures of the deed. Just a couple caveats before we leave. Deeds. Some deeds transfer in probate and not in the registry of deeds. So if you get stuck and there's no book and page number, or you can't find it in the indexes, then what you need to start doing is stop your deed work and start doing genealogy research. That's when it's time to start looking at the families. And that's actually what I did in this case. I got back to 1954. I didn't actually have I couldn't find another deed. I didn't realize it was in 1892. It was so long ago. So if you get stuck, don't panic. Just say, okay, let me just do some genealogy research, learn more about these families, and that's probably where you're going to figure it out. In Massachusetts, we have a thing called land court. They don't necessarily have that in other states. And sometimes if there's a legal issue, your house could end up in land court. It's a parallel system. And if your house is there, once it's there, it's always there. So once you move from recorded land into land court, your house and everything moving forward is always going to be in land court. On the registry website, there's a little thing that says land court, and you can just check there if you can't find any information about your house, search in that index. Okay, step 3, historic commission inventory form. So I decided to add this here because it could potentially provide information about your house, and you might as well get a jump on it without having to work too hard. So the way it works is your local town, Wayland, has created building surveys of historical properties. And not all historical properties. I don't know how any town decides how they're going to do a building survey or not, but your house may have one or they may not. Then that building survey is sent to the state, and then the state puts it online, and they put it in a system called the Mass Cultural Resource Information System, which is known as MACRIS. And you can't really see the URL here, but it's, if you just put MACRIS into Google, it will automatically come up. This is the website. So you would go over to and put Wayland in where it says town. See where it says apply? That it's a little quirky, this website, so make sure you hit the apply button or nothing will happen. Some websites are just kind of not intuitive. So this is what a completed inventory looks like. So there is not a completed inventory for 396 Old Connecticut Path. This is Thomas School. And I also just want to point out how it is local, because this one was completed by Jane Siaka. So just bring it full circle here, to show you that it was done locally and then it went to the state and got online. So it'll have a picture, which is nice. So this picture probably dates back to 1985, have some basic information. The second page, there's architectural significance, historical significance, and then the bibliography and the references. Now, the bibliography and the references may not interest you. However, they will help you determine whether the information in this form is accurate or not. The older the surveys that were done were based more heavily on secondary information like county histories, things like that. And as we go into more recent time, they're based more heavily on original research, actually looking at deeds and city directories and tax records and things like that. So the bibliography and references, not only will it give you some clues where you can find stuff about your own house, but it will help you determine whether you can trust the information in here. Now, I would definitely recommend going here, especially if you have an old house, like 1700s, definitely there should be a form here. And that's great, because that means not only would be the architectural history, but a narrative history of who was in your house. So that's a good starting point for you. So you can access that from home. All right, so the fun part of your house history research really starts with census records, and that would be my next step in this process. So what you're going to do now is you have all these names that are on this deed list, and you're going to figure out who these people are and how do they fit into the history of this house, how do they fit into the history of this town. So just a little bit about census records for those of you who might not be familiar. We have census records from 1790 to 1950, with the exception of 1890, which got accidentally destroyed. From 1850 to 1950, we have what they call an every name listing of everybody in the house. So everybody who was in the house, whether they were 1 year old or 75 years old, their names and ages and everything are included. Prior to 1850, so from 1790 to 1840, we only have the head of household. So we have much more limited information. But going back to 1850, we can get a lot of information, but you can keep using that information. And then there are some other documents and records that we can use prior to 1790 if your house is older than that. Some of the information you'll find in census records include occupation, place of birth, whether a house was owned or rented. And that's an important thing. You've done your deed research, you've gotten the names of all the people in the deeds, but you don't necessarily know yet whether those people lived in the house or not. And the census records will show us that. So let's start winding our way down Old Connecticut Path. So we're starting again with 1950 and we're working our way backwards. And so what this is going to do is it's going to now tell us who lived in the house. So here in 1950, we've got George Richardson and his wife Alice. And we've got his daughter Betty, daughter Jean, George, and son Spencer. And we also have father George Richardson, his father, who's 82, and his mother Rose, who's 83. So we've got a 3-generation family here. George, who's listed as the head, he's 42. And he's listed as a poultryman in 1950. So we get the ages of everyone there. And it tells where they were all born in Massachusetts. So On the left-hand side, it says Connecticut Path. So for certain, let me see if I put it, oops. From 1880 to 1950, you're gonna see the names of the streets on the censuses. So that's very helpful. All right, going back in time, 1940, we have now George and Alice are not listed as the head. Now as head, we have George and Rose. George is 73, Rose is 73. And then we have Prentice. Prentice on this census is actually the same as George. And you'll find that a lot on the censuses. Names will vary. Sometimes they'll use the formal name, sometimes they'll use the nickname. It makes sense since his dad is the head of the house and he's in the son role, that his more familiar name is being used here, but when he became head of house, he used his more formal name. So we've got Prentice and his wife Alice, and then daughter Betty and Jean and son Prentice. And is that's you on the census here? So as the grandson, you're called Prentice as well here on this.
Yeah, only on that.
Yeah, here, yes. Yeah, so we have some of the Richardsons here indeed with us, in case I do anything wrong. They're here to set me straight. All right, so George is listed as a foreman of a farm, and his son, your dad, is listed as a poultryman. All right, and then, so we go to 1930, I can't even read that now. But basically, it's the same family, except this time, instead of Prentice and Alice and their kids, we just have George and Rose's kids. Actually, there's a brother-in-law listed there.
Yeah.
And yeah.
And Gertrude's.
Oh, and a son-in-law. That's right? He's a son-in-law. All right, let's go to the next one because it'd be easier to read. 1920, we've got George Richardson, his wife Rose, and now just two sons, Ernest and Prentice, at home with them. So Rose, it shows that she's born in Massachusetts here. And then it says her father was born in Holland, and it says Holland for her mother. These fields are going to constantly change. In the next one down here, it says Holland for her father and German for her mother. So this just keeps, census information is not always completely accurate. It's based, anybody could have answered the question. There's a census enumerators coming around saying, okay, who lives here? Where were they born? That information. So if a child is giving that information, they're going to give the best answer that they can. Let's see. One thing that they have here in 1910, Rose had 8 children, 7 living. That information is there on the census. All right. And then back to 1900, we've got George and Rose. So now we've got Holland and Germany. And the kids are at school. Oh, the 1900 census actually has their month and year of birth, which is very helpful. Seems like I didn't put. All right. And then we go back to 1880. So the property transferred from Henry Fisher to Rose Richardson in 1892. So now we're getting back to Henry. So Henry is 57. He's a farmer. So this is funny. So it just says Baden, 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 Baden. Baden is in Germany. Somebody just gave Baden as the answer for all that. And also the name of Henry's wife changes variously during the censuses between Charlotte and Mary, things like that. All right, let's just go to the next one. Okay, 1870. All right, so here we have Henry Fisher, his wife Catherine, son Henry and William, Frank, Margaret, Louisa, Lizzie, Rosa, and Arthur. Let's see, this one is really interesting, actually. The birthplace, it says Amsterdam, and this is fantastic. It says Frankfurt on the Main, Germany. I would say this is the best information of all the censuses. Also, the parents are younger and the children are younger. The children are less likely to be giving the information. The parents are probably the ones supplying it. What I want you to note here is that you will get clues on these census records, and not only will it help you build the families, but it will give you information about the real estate. So here in Wayland, he bought the property in 1866 from Sam Ward. So we've got a real estate, value of real estate here, and then value of personal. So we know that Henry owned land. And if we know he's got, if there's a value to the real estate, then you know there's deeds to find. I'm going to show you the 1860 census, even though he didn't live in Wayland at the time, he lived in Natick. But notice here, under real estate, it's empty.
Yeah.
So you can say, okay, he didn't own land. So these are really good clues to help you in your research. Now this kind of tripped me up a little bit because Henry actually did own land prior. He bought a 28-acre farm in Natick in 1858, but then he turned around and sold it in 1859. So when I saw that no real estate there, I'm like, what? But then I'm like, no, he sold it in 1859. And then the war happened, and then he bought the farm in Wayland, Holland, and Germany. This here says MA, and that's like a loop. It looks like a kind of an open P. So they used to have a long S in the old-fashioned writing. So that actually says Mass. That's 2 S's. That's supposed to be 2 S's. And we also have here at the bottom, Johann Jaeger. So I think that that's Henry's wife's father at the bottom. And from the research that I did, I didn't do a lot, but there seemed to be a lot of Jaegers. So there were a lot of Jaegers in the area. So Henry Fisher, oh, I think there were Fishers too. Henry didn't just come here on his own. His wife's whole family, I don't know who came first, whether it was her family came first or she came first with her husband, but a lot of Jaegers in this area of Wayland and Natick. All right, now if you were paying attention, I told you that the 1890 census was destroyed, right? But this is not the 1890 population schedule. They have different, what they call schedules for censuses. And this is the veteran census, and this is really interesting. So Henry B. Fisher was in the Civil War. He enlisted, according to this, in December 1863. That's what that says here. And he got out in June 18th, 1865. He was in for 1 year and 6 months. And I want to draw your attention. This is on the same page. I just couldn't show it to y'all. This says shot through right arm. And I'm curious if you guys have later, I want to hear if you know about that. I can't even imagine running a farm with an arm that has been shot through in the 1860s when medical care wasn't great. Now, there's one more thing I want to show you about this. So not only did Henry serve in the Civil War for 18 months, let's go back to the 1860 census. There we go. We've got Henry, his wife. We've got 4 kids. And then I have to tell you, Henry and his wife had 2 more kids before he left in 1863 for the Civil War. He went off to the Civil War and his wife was home with 6 kids, 10 and under. 10 and under. So I hope Johann lived for a long time and he was there to help his daughter take care of those kids, because I just could not even imagine. And then he got home and he had 2 more kids. But at least they were able to help him out. This is just a visual to show you that not all the censuses are the same. The older ones have less information as you go forward. 1900, you can see it's a lot more crowded. So the closer you get to the present, the more information you will get from any particular census. But I really just want you to know that they're not all the same. Census records are available from ancestry.com. That is a paid subscription site, but like I said at the start, you can access it for free here in the library. FamilySearch.org is a free site. You can get it from there. You have to set up a free account. And just if you happen to have MyHeritage or Find My Past already, you can get that information there. All right, probate, I'm not really going to talk about it because I've talked a lot. I'm behind schedule here. What I want you to know about probate is it's definitely worth looking for. You can find probate records on Ancestry. You can also find them at Probate Court in Cambridge. There are wills. The documents in the wills will provide more information about family. If somebody doesn't leave a will, it's what you call administration. There are files for that too. But oftentimes there will be estate inventories that list the items in a house. There are also guardianships for the children if the father dies young. And then if the property transfers in probate and not in deeds, that's where you're going to find that. This is an example of a house inventory. So it's listing all the items in a particular house. I'm just going to skip that. All right, so next up, we've got vital records. So censuses are every 10 years. Vital records are going to fill in the in-between time. So it's going to give you birth, death, marriage information. And in the old days, births and deaths were happening in the house. And you will find record of people who were born and died between the censuses. And the first 2 generations with the Fishers and then with Rose and George as well, they both had a child that did not live. And families typically don't talk about that, and you find it in the records, and then you're like, oh. So Ancestry, Family Search, AmericanAncestor.org, they're all really good for finding vital records. I'm going to show you some examples. I can only show you a few because I'd be here all night if I would show you all the Richardson vital records that I found. So this is Rose Ann Fisher's birth record. So back in the day, it was a single page and the clerk just listed everybody on that page. I propped it. And so when she was born, on her birth record, her name was Rosa Anna Fisher. And she was born in Wayland to Henry and Catherine. And he was a shoemaker from Holland, and the mother was from Germany. This is a marriage records for George Prentice Richardson and Alice Mary Porter. And this was in 1929. So this is the full page of what it looks like with the crammed on. And then there's this there in the middle. George, it's number 34. George Prentice Richardson and Alice Mary Porter. He's from Wayland. She's from Natick. He's a mechanic. She's a bookkeeper. And I thought it was interesting that they were married by the town clerk, who was a justice of the peace. I don't know if you knew that. And then we have a death record for Henry Fisher. He died in 1893. So he sold the house to his daughter in 1892 and he died the next year. This is good actually because it gives the names of his parents, Jacob Fisher and Christina, his mother from Holland. But the real reason I want to show you this is because this is the state copy of the death record. And this is the local Wayland copy of the death record. And really the only difference in the information is information about the doctors and official people. Most of the other information was transferred to the state. But these original documents, the town hall, with the help of the Historical Commission and Kay, got these digitized and put online. So you can access these from home, and there's more in this database than just returns of deaths. It's a really fascinating collection. I wrote a blog post about it, so you can check that out there. This is not a vital record, but it was so interesting I had to just throw it in here anyways. So this is part of the naturalization record for Henry Fisher. His middle name is Benjamin. He was born 18 May 1822. He arrived to Boston the 8th of March 1838 at age 16. And he was naturalized in 1854. So that's really good information, which we're going to contrast in just a minute to something else we have. Gravestones are also really good. Go to the local cemeteries, visit the people who used to live in your house. In this case, it's all family. You should be visiting your family anyways, but it's really fun to go to a cemetery, and actually in the old days, they didn't always leave town, and so you can visit the people who used to live in your home and let them know that you're taking care of it and whatever. And also obituaries are a great source of information. They provide more information than vital records because they tell you more of the story of a person's life. And so this is an obituary for Rose, and that's a picture I grabbed off of. Do you have a cousin named Pam? Yeah, and she's a McKay.
Yes.
Yeah, so I think that picture's from her. She's done a lot of really great genealogical research on your family. So look for obituaries. So this is a visual of what happened in this house. So we've got Henry Fisher there at the top. So those are all the kids he had, but the one who got the house, and it's not really so uncommon, second to youngest. Usually it's the youngest, things get kind of, because they're still around. They haven't left. So Rose, it went from Rose, for me, in my view of researching the family, kind of became like the matriarch, larger than life of the family. And then her children, so her son George was then given the house, and then George's daughter Betty, your sister, lived in the house next, and then Betty sold the house in 2022 to her nephew Spencer. And I should have realized that earlier than I did, because the name Spencer carries on through here. All right, so that's a visual of the family. There are lots of maps of Wayland. The library has digitized, they have a collection upstairs which they keep locked, but they digitize them all, they're all online. And then in addition to those, there are these maps on Ancestry. So you can actually see where that arrow is. You can see Henry B. Fisher right there on the map in 1875. Here's one from 1889. You can't see his house here. This is a bird's eye map. It's just a cool map, but where that arrow is pointing is actually where the farm is. So it's just kind of fun. I thought I'd share that one. That one is from the Library of Congress. Sometimes you can actually find the house you live in on these maps, and that's so cool. You can blow them up bigger even. City directories, this is from, so city directories are what we had before telephones. So it was the same thing as a phone book, except without a phone number. And this is from 1931. It's showing Ernest Richardson, who was an auto repairer, Prentice Richardson, who was also an auto repairer, and then George, husband of Rose, who was a farmer at Old Connecticut Path. I've gone into detail in a blog post about this one. Annual listings are available online as well. And they do this, it's a thing they do in Massachusetts. And you can basically see who lived in a particular house and what their job was. So in 1956, Prentice was superintendent of the water department. That was pretty neat. Okay, I'm going to spend a few minutes on this valuations, and then we're pretty much done. Because this is really important to house history research, and since you have these online, you have no excuse for not using them. So what I want to do now is show you how to use them. So The valuation at the top is actually from 1864 when Sam Ward owned the property. And the lower one is 1866 when Henry Fisher owned the property. When you're going back and you're not sure if you have the right property or not, there are two things here that help you understand that you do. First, all the numbers are the same. These are acres, so 15, 15, 10, and 6. Those are the acres for mowing and tillage, pasture and woodland and meadow. And then this is the value. These numbers match identically. So you know that yes, so if Henry had bought multiple properties, you would know this is the property he bought from Sam Ward. However, there's another huge clue here, and it's just a matter of going slow and reading. It says here, transfer from SB Ward, right there. It's so scriggly, you probably don't even notice it, but that tells you that it came from him. And so the people in the tax person in Wayland, the assessor, wrote that information there, and that's going to help you understand that the land has transferred from one person to the next. It's good. In some cases, it's going to be critical. Now, we need to get to the issue of the multiple houses. And the assessor saying the house was built in 1878. So I said, well, was that house built in 1878? We're going to start with 1880. Here at the top, so the assessor page is actually two. The one on the top is 2 pages. The one on the top is the left-hand page, and the one on the bottom is the right. So imagine these just being one big continuous line. I couldn't show it all in one thing. So on the left-hand side, we've got horses and things like that. 1 bull, 2 horses, a cow, 2 heifers, and 1 swine. And on this, we have both Henry B. Fisher and Henry B. Fisher Jr. Henry B. Fisher Jr. doesn't have anything. But on the second page, you can look at the numbers. So 26 up there is Henry Fisher. So we look at 26 now. We know it's the same person going across. So now we have a house, 250, barn, 250, shop, 500. That must have been some shop. It's worth more than the house. And then down here is Junior's house. His house is worth 1,300, but it's newer. And then, all right, so that's 1880. All right, so Henry's house is worth 250. This is 1881. Forget about that. Look, so Henry B. Fisher, line 18. Now, line 18 on the bottom, we see a barn for 250. I can't tell you how many times I went back and forth, and then I'm like, no, that's when it burned. There was no house there at tax. I think they lived with Henry Jr. when the house burned. And here's Henry Jr.'s house, 1,300. Okay. Now, 1882, Henry B. Fisher, now his house is 900. So we went from 250 to nothing to 900. That's going to tell you, it's your biggest clue that something has changed with the house. We have other evidence, such as family memory, and another which I'm about to show you. But if you didn't have anything else, you can tell when additions were put onto your house, or sometimes fires happen and just a section of the house burns down. So a house value could decrease as well. So these tax records are absolutely critical that you analyze the values. If you were looking to answer a question, either when a house was built. So if somebody were to buy a property, there's no house on it, the value is gonna, well, it's not gonna say house, but it'll be much lower total taxes. And then as the house gets built, you'll start to see a rate. And then as they add on to the house, then the rate will increase. Really important for house history research. Okay, so last step, newspapers. This is the best thing. So you guys are so lucky in Wayland because you have the local paper, the Town Crier. You only have it for like 10 or 15 or 20 years, but it's incredibly helpful. They're online and you can just access it from home. So I found this article, Mr. and Mrs. Richardson have been married for 68 years. This article helped me so much. So I pulled out 2 quotes from it. His daughter Rose was born in a big farmhouse there, which burned when she was 14. Okay, so I'd done my vital record research. I knew she was born in 1867. I did the math slowly, because I'm not good with math, and 1881. So what her memory, which is recorded in this newspaper article, matches up with the tax information about the house being burned down and gone. So that's great. When you can have differing sources corroborate what you find, it's like, yes, yes, it's right. And then we have, as a little girl, she attended the Thomas School, an old Connecticut path near the aqueduct. So that house that I showed you from the building survey,
Yep.
That's where she went to school. So it wasn't a waste showing you that house, because it fit. And so this is just an absolutely delightful article here. It talks about how George Richardson had to get the train from Boston, and then he had to walk 3 miles over dirt roads just to go visit her to court her. That's what's in this article here. So I'm assuming you guys have this article.
Yes.
Yeah, it's just an absolute treasure. All right. So other newspaper articles. This article is from 1953, but even though we don't have earlier newspapers, they do throwbacks. So this is saying how they looked 40 years ago. So this is an article from 1953, but it's showing a picture from 1913. So we have Gertrude Richardson and Edna Richardson right here. This is graduation from high school. So that's a great picture to find. This is, say you? Well, there you go. This one, right? That's you. Yeah, that's her.
I was here.
So that was 1956. This is 1953, Gertrude. So these are just kind of like correspondence sent home, where are they now sort of thing. Gertrude Richardson, now Mrs. Alton Schleicher of Hyannis. And she was enjoying Cape Cod for 23 years. And then this one, which I love so much, Harriet Edna Richardson, now Mrs. Joseph McKay. She has 7 sons, all members of the armed forces.
Oh my God.
Okay, almost done. Yeah, photos. These are from the yearbook. So that's Herbert Place in the car. This is the yearbook photo. So these are the senior portraits. So here's Herbert Place and Betty Richardson, and they married just weeks after they graduated high school. And I love this picture because Herbert is here and Betty is right next to him. And this is Jean, who is Spencer's mom. That's her senior portrait. And these yearbooks are also available online. And there are so many pictures. I just thought I couldn't put them all in. We'd be here all night. Yep, and so there you go. I hope that was helpful in demonstrating how you can walk through house history research. And I hope it inspires you to research your house, whether it's here in Wayland or anywhere else in Massachusetts. Yep.
So what happened to the second house on the property? Because I would have, if I had started that, I would have looked at that house and said that that's probably 1860s, the mansard.
Well, so the first house burned down.
But weren't there 2 houses on the property at one time?
Yes. For a short time.
Okay. Good.
Now, this is family law, but Henry B. Fisher Senior had a house, which is where my house is now. It's like a bit up the street. And he was worked in the shoe shop. He built some parts of the shoes, and they sent them to the store. So he had a big, that's why he had a shop.
Oh, so that $500
That was
shop was
his-
probably
that
his
was
shoe shop, okay.
And ultimately, one night the clipping had too close to the stove and the whole place. went
Oh,
kaput. But he had given his son Henry Jr. an acre of land. And Henry Jr. had built the house that we researched, you just researched. And that's the house, they moved into that house, and then Henry moved out. After.
interesting.
Can you repeat it for the audience?
Yeah, so he's saying that there were the property and there was the shoe shop, and the shoe shop ended up and the shoe shop at Henry's house, and then the shoe shop ended burning, and then the house burned down, but Henry had given an acre of land to his son Henry Jr. and he built the house. And so you're saying that Henry Sr. moved into Henry Jr.'s house and Henry Jr.'s moved somewhere else.
Right.
All
That's what
All right.
my grandmother and folklore says.
Okay, so the only confusing thing for me is Henry's Jr.'s house was valued at 1,300. And then the next year, when the new house was built, this house is valued at 900.
Is
So,
that Henry's, well,
yeah, that was Henry Jr.'s house was valued at 1,300.
there's no possibility.
Yeah, and then Henry Jr.'s not there anymore, not next door, and the house is only valued at 900. So there's maybe more we've got to research into that as to what exactly happened there. You might have it in family documents or something. He says he doubts it. Was there a question? Sorry.
How did you choose this house to research?
Kay picked this house for me. Kay is here. She's with the Historical Commission. And
What made you choose this house?
You choose the house.
oh, did I pick this house? Okay,
I kind of edged you toward it, but.
she gave me two houses, and this is clearly the house that I would pick. I didn't think there was any real thought that was needed for that, but I had no idea going into it that it was going to be so interesting. Like, number one, I've never researched a house that was only one family. And then I've never researched a house that had all these clauses about, take care of your parents. That was great. Now, I want to clarify one thing though. One question I get asked is in the house, a property like this really brings up this question. How far back do you research? Do you research just the one house? Do you continue researching? Obviously, Sam Ward had a farmhouse there before Henry Fisher. Do you keep researching that? How far back do you go? And so the answer to that question is, well, you go back as far as you want to go. I mean, you're doing the research. So if you just want to research the house that you're in, which is what I did, that is fine. If you want to say, okay, I know that this house is new and the old house burned, but there was a house there, I'm going to continue researching. You can research all the way back to the original land grant if you like. The Historical Commission would love that. I would love that. You can go as far as you want, but it's really just up to you. But it's not so rare a thing really to find previous houses on the same property. If you look at the clues, you'll find that.
A couple of questions online.
Yeah.
Well, there's a whole bunch, but would this process be the same in Plymouth, Mass? And then someone else asked, how would it be different in other states?
Okay, so the answer for Plymouth is yes, and I believe everything is online for Plymouth deeds. So Middlesex is really one of the more difficult websites because they don't have everything online. I do believe that everything is online for Plymouth all the way back.
I think we have some folks from New Hampshire as well.
Oh, okay. Yeah, good, because if they're from Kansas or something, I would probably be able to help them off the top of my head. Yes, for the most part, it's going to be the same process. In New England, there are some slight jurisdictional changes. So for instance, in Rhode Island and Connecticut, deeds are researched at town hall, not at the county level. At New Hampshire, it's at the county level, but I think there are some other slight differences there, but basically it's gonna be the same process, yeah.
Someone asked if, is it possible to research the history of like the renters in the house?
Can you repeat the question?
Oh, yeah, so she wants to know, is it possible to research the history of the renters? So every house talk that I do kind of has different lessons to teach because of what we find from the house. In this particular house, there were no renters. However, it's fairly common in Massachusetts to find houses with renters, particularly as industrialization is going full throttle and people are moving west. They don't want to sell the homestead, so they rent it out. So like starting in 1880, you start to find other people in the house, and you can't find the house by last name because the owner's not there. So that's when the street on the census becomes really important. There are tools for helping to locate, but yeah, you definitely want to research the renters as well because they're part of the story of your house. And their lives are, you know, what happened to them is very important. I mean, I've found houses that I did last year, sometimes there were Irish families that had like 12 kids or more. And, you know, it's just really interesting to hear that kind of information about the house that you lived in. And it's fun to see their occupations. And we were talking before the talk that Wayland was a big shoemaking town. And we see that play out in the census records. With this family, there were a couple of shoemakers. Henry Fisher was a shoemaker. So you want to research everything about your house, regardless of whether it's an owner or renter.
Do deeds typically show the consideration or the amount of money that the grantee paid the grantor
Okay,
for
so
the property?
the question is, do deeds typically show the amount of consideration or the money paid for the property? By law now, they have to. But previously they didn't. So a lot of times they'll just say for $1 and other consideration. So as you go back towards 1900, you'll find the dollar amount less and less. However, the way to get around that is to look for the mortgage, and the mortgage typically follows the page after the deed. And you can get a pretty good sense of how much they paid by the mortgage. It's not going to be the full amount. And then the other thing is the tax stamps that they pay for the property. And if you're good in math, you can look up the historical rate of the tax, and then you can calculate out the value that was paid for the house based on the tax stamp they paid. I'm not good in math. That's not one thing I actually like to go do too often.
When you were talking about the assessor's information, I noticed that the polls are on there.
Yes.
And sometimes you'll see young men paying their poll, but they own no personal property, which is the horses and the cows and machinery, and no house lot or anything. So you know that they're either a young man working for somebody else, or they're living with their parents still and they don't own anything. But that's another way of checking somebody.
So Kay is saying that on the assessor's taxes, these valuation lists that I've been showing you tonight, it shows poll taxes, and actually Henry B. Jr. comes on the valuation list and he's just paying a $2 poll tax. But I didn't show you those tonight because I just couldn't show you every single detail. But he's on the list at the like 1871 paying a $2 poll tax. So once they hit the age of majority, they're paying their taxes. Yeah. So lots of great information you can get from these records.
Someone's asking, do you have any advice for how to organize a family tree for a house? My house was built in 1890 and I've traced the history of all the owners. I have them all and their families in a tree and ancestry, but it's really a lot of separate trees.
Yes.
And doesn't provide a good visual way to see the history of the residents in the house.
All right, so the question was, how do you handle
What's a good visual way to organize?
a visual way to show the families when there's multiple families? I'm gonna go back up here to that tree that I created. Yeah, this was really lucky because this was one family. So you can use a tool like Ancestry or other, software to create trees like this, but there's no way around it. All you can do is multiple trees. The trees would be smaller because you're only gonna have a generation or two, and then the next family would move in. So what I do, like in this case, is I just did a screenshot. So pull up your family tree, do a screenshot, it's gonna be a smaller family, and then take all those mini screenshots and then put them onto one. Either you can do a chronology or just lay them out on one page. I don't know of any other way you could possibly do it.
Couldn't you do it just that way? I mean, it doesn't matter that they have
Well-
different names.
Yeah, it's just that she would have like, say there's 4 families and one tree over there, one tree here, one tree here, and one tree here. There would just be multiple trees, but yeah, I mean, I don't know.
Or not, just say it's the house tree. The first people
Yeah,
are at the top and then the next people are,
I mean, it's a
Hello?
good topic. It's definitely something for further investigation. I guess I get so caught up in the story, I don't worry about it visually so much. But yeah, it's a good point. Yep.
This may sound totally tangential, but back to the question of renters in multiple family dwellings. So there's a tenement museum
Mhm.
in New York City.
Mhm.
And then there's another one in Dublin, in Ireland,
Mhm.
that has used the New York City Tenement Museum as an example. And for me, the way that the Tenement Museum traced those renters and then told the story, not just of the individual families, but also of migration and movement and composition of neighborhoods in New York, feels like a really good model for thinking about that. Like if
Mhm.
I were to run across that,
Mhm.
I'm thinking of a house that we lived in actually in Troy, New York. I think it had been built maybe in 1700 or around there. And my mom rented it. And I know there were people renting before that and people renting afterward.
Mhm.
And so I'm thinking of that tenement museum kind of model along with what you offered as, as the way that I would think about this story of that old house in Troy, New York.
So she's saying that the tenement museum in New York has a lot to offer in the way of displaying the history. I know about the tenement museum, but I haven't been to see that, so I don't know exactly what you're talking about. I think if I were sharing a history of the family as opposed to a class on how to research, I would probably do this completely differently. So I will think about that. And maybe in a future presentation, touch on that a little bit more and give me a good excuse to go to New York and.
You can go online,
Oh.
by the way.
So they have it broken down online?
They have a huge
Okay.
YouTube videos and
Okay.
they do online programs and so
Mhm.
there's lots there.
Okay.
It's a different topic. Another source of information that I find useful are the files in the building department. If your house has ever been renovated or
Mhm.
added on to or anything done to it, there will be plans,
Mhm.
plot plans, septic plans, and information on those plans. Names of owners, names of neighbors that are useful for giving you the next thing to go look at.
So she's saying that there's information you can get from the town building department for renovations or when plumbing was put in or electricity was put in, all this kind of stuff was put in, and their building permits.
It's not
for-
online, but it's.
Yeah, and it varies from town to town as to how far back it goes. The city of Boston has them online and they actually go back to the 1800s. Many towns only have it back to like 1970. So it really is a town by town basis as to what you're going to find. But it is certainly worth going to your town hall and poking around and asking, you know, make friends with your assessor and see what they have. It's all in the basement. That's where it is. They won't tell you that. They're not legally, let me tell you, they're not legally allowed to throw out these tax records. So when they say, oh, we don't have them, they do have them. They just are saying, I really don't want to get them for you. You had a question? Like, sorry, did you have a question or no? No. Lady, no, it's me.
I
Yeah.
have a question for the family.
Oh,
Are there any wild stories you can tell us from this day things?
I bet there are.
Secret histories?
She's asking for wild stories about the family.
I do not know any wild stories that I validated. But I never had heard of the being shot in the arm,
Oh,
Henry B. Fisher. That was never mentioned.
oh, I'm so happy I brought something new.
Yeah.
He didn't know about being shot in the arm. Good.
Although he was on the farm all the time, I know he worked in the shoe shop. Yeah, when we were excavating for the house, we found many leather cuttings were still there from, 100 years before.
This would be great for an archaeological dig. Yes. Yeah. Do you have a picture of the old farmhouse or of Henry or his wife? I'm just curious.
I don't believe so.
Oh, that's too bad. Yeah.
How are people going to tell in the future from tax records? Because in this town, the housing taxes are going way up.
Mhm.
And if you buy your house and you put an addition on it,
Mhm.
and then years later, the taxes are way up with no other internal work done on the house. How would that be understood?
So she's asking, how are people gonna know in the future with how high the valuations are right now if somebody puts an addition on their house, whether, well, an addition is still gonna cost a good 10,000 at least, I mean, at the minimum. So for your house to go from, let's say 900,000 to 920, yeah, that would be hard to see.
But you can look up the tax rates from that
Yeah.
time. Probably.
Yeah, I don't know. It's certainly worth considering. I don't think I'm gonna worry about it too much personally, because I'm so busy trying to research all those houses from the past. So I love having the family here because it shows you there's only so far you can go with archival research, with going with the documents. If you can combine it with family history, you're gonna have a much richer story and more accurate story to tell. And things like this will spark conversations. Oh, I didn't know that, or I do know that. Oh, she's a little wrong about that, or whatever. But that is such good dialogue, and it brings it all out, and then all of that can be preserved for the future. You can contact former owners. It used to be easier. Before 2000, I think, people were more open and receptive to receiving things from strangers. And the last 25 years, it hasn't quite been. But you can still, contact previous owners and maybe they'll tell you a little something. What I have found, the best way, whether it's genealogy or house history research, is to write about it in a blog. And when you write about it, then people will respond and they'll find you online or they'll send you pictures or whatever. But town histories, when historical societies have Facebook pages, my town is a very active Facebook page. All we have to do is post a picture of an old house and we'll have 3 different former owners online talking about, oh yeah, we used to blow fireworks on the 4th of July and so got injured and this happened and that happened and we are building an incredible history online on Facebook in this group as a result of that activity. It's tremendous if you can do it, but it does take somebody who's willing to go on Facebook and post regularly for your historical society to do that. But that, in my town, that has generated so much dialogue and so many memories. Anytime I have a question about something or anybody else in the society has a question, we just go ask in the group, and if it's in, since 1900, people will be able to give us information usually.
So if you happen to have a library or you're visiting a town that you want to do more research on your ancestor, and they don't have a local history librarian and aren't willing to get it as you suggested, because it's in the basement, all the history. My suggestion is you go to the Historical Society, because that's a really good source, and let them know in advance so they could pull out information to provide.
So Kay is suggesting that you go to the local historical society for information if you don't find anybody in the library. My philosophy is, no matter what town it is, there is somebody in that town, whether they are official or unofficial, there is a town historian in that town, or there's a group of guys like in my town that meet at the coffee shop every week and they sit around the table. You can go up to them and they've been in the town forever. There are always those people in town, but sometimes it takes going to the town and asking around to find those people. My ancestors are from this town called Glen, New York, in Montgomery County, New York. And my dad and I, we just turned up and drove up people's driveways. And we met this one family, and they said, oh, this lady here, she's the one who knows everything. Go see her. But wait till she's done with church and then go see her. And so we did that, and we went and she shared all sorts of information with us. We were able to go to the house that my great-grandfather was born in. People actually let us in and gave us a tour. So going to the town is helpful. If you can't go to the town, then seek out these groups like on Facebook, or start emailing people and keep emailing people. The repetitive nature of your activity shows people that you're not going to go away, and then they will start to give you answers to questions.
I'm sorry, go ahead. I have a question about, the house we live in is not old. It was built in 1950. But on our property, we found what seems to be an old foundation. There's all these place stones, and when I'm digging in the garden, I find all kinds of old metal things and such. And so, there is no house there. And so would you suggest I go to maps for starting?
Yeah. So she says her house was built in 1950, and yet she's found kind of a foundation on her property, and she's finding all these metal pieces. So there probably was. If your house was built in 1950, there obviously was another structure there at some point. All these maps would be very helpful. Let me go back. So some of these maps on Ancestry, they're called land ownership maps, and they list the owners. This was like a popular thing to do in the 1800s. Oops, I think I went too far. Let's see. There we go. Okay. Let me just go down to the maps. And if you look at one of these maps, you can see, this is why I say it's dangerous to start from these maps and research forward. But if you have a 1950 house and you look at these maps, you can clearly see that there's a family on your property. Then I would go research that family, and the deeds and tax records and anything else will help you figure out what was on your property. Sure. There may be even notations in the assessors, the way we saw the transfer from Samuel B. Ward to the Fishers, so. And these assessor records, since your house was built in 1950, these assessor records go back to about 1860. You might find information there.
More are coming, by the way.
Oh, really?
For this town, yes.
And I just want to say, it is very unusual to find tax valuation lists online in Massachusetts, so again, kudos to Wayland for doing that. The books exist, but they're not online.
There's another way that this person that just spoke, if you start collecting the artifacts,
Mhm.
they could be dated
Mhm.
within a certain time period, and that might tell you something.
Yeah, so our resident archaeologist is telling the previous questioner that she should be saving the artifacts and then they can be dated. And that's true. What I'm presenting to you today is archival research, but this is a multidisciplinary field. So there are also historical contractors who can walk through your house. You know, in New England, we've got big house, little house, back house, barn. So there are people who specialize in the physical aspect of the house, and they can walk through your house and tell you how old each section is. And then, of course, we have archaeologists. We can take historical landscape people to analyze the plantings in the yard or traditional gardens and things like that. So you can definitely go much further than just the archival research. I happen to be very comfortable in my little archival chair. But definitely, there's a lot of value to opening it up to other disciplines. Yeah, for sure. So don't forget the archaeology, is what I'm hearing.
And I'll tell you something, there are historical architects whose specialty is to go around and get mortar from between old foundations,
Yeah.
and they can date it.
Yeah, so she's saying that people can date it based on the materials used in building the house, absolutely. And, you know, it's an endless topic, you know, you can scrape paint colors and all sorts of things. Yep, it's a nice, big, wide open field. Yeah, I just want to spark an interest in you all so you'll get started and start researching your houses and start preserving that history.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.